Welcome back, everyone. And again, I have a friend of the pod from this past summer, John Glowatz came on the pod and talked about old Northeast rivalries returning. And we're starting a new series. I guess we'll call it Northeast Bowl Talk. It's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. We look at the bowl races in conferences later on in the season and review the projections of the Fenway, the Military, and the Pinstripe Bowls. John, before we start, do you have anything to say? I guess a quick reintroduction of yourself and your work as well.
Sure, Omar. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Great to be back. Yeah, I'm just a big Northeast guy. College football, college basketball. One of the few, as you know, Omar, who cares about college sports in the Northeast. So, Penn State fan by birth, UConn fan by marriage, and I've just kind of adopted the rest of the Northeast as teams that I follow. Some of them I hate more than I like, but you know, you need that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess now more than ever with not really a centralized Eastern Conference, and it's getting even worse, especially for schools like Temple. We need people who love Northeast football because, I mean, that's just where the roots of the game are. I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts until I was in sixth grade, or until I was in seventh grade, excuse me. And, I've always known that there is a respect and history and reverence deserving to the Northeast in football. And I guess it's good that they have some bowls, or the 21st century is able to bring us bowls into the Northeast, and we'll talk about that. I guess starting now. So I want to ask first just a general question about the Fenway Bowl. That's a bowl I'm excited for. I'm hoping to go to as well. I think Fenway Park at all the ballparks has got the most beautiful, I guess, sort of field alignment. With Green Monster in the background on the sideline. It's just great, but. Love the Fenway Bowl, but I'm not sure I love the bowl tie-ins for the Fenway Bowl. So I want to ask, do you think the Fenway Bowl is already in trouble? Because as we'll look at these projections, there's not the only regional team that they have in these projections is Boston and Pitt, and even Pitt doesn't travel well. And then you'll see teams like Memphis and UCF making the trip to Fenway in these projections. So do you think the Bowl's in trouble already?
I mean, I wouldn't say in trouble. A lot of these bowl games are just created literally for ESPN to put content on TV. So as long as that exists, then that's there's no problem. So I don't know if that's the case with the Fenway Bowl, but I imagine they understand what they're getting into when they this will be the first year that they've actually played it, right? That last year it got canceled because of COVID. So it's not something that has been sitting around and languishing for a while. I assume everybody who's on the back end knows what they're doing, at least to some extent. So I'd love to see a team like Boston College play there locally. It might not be quite fair to whomever their opponent is, but you know, not that many fans really care about football in the Northeast anyway. So maybe it would be a pretty equal split if one of the more well traveling AAC teams ends up in the Fenway Bowl against BC.
For sure. And looking at these projections for the Fenway Bowl that we have already, and just going back to your point, actually, before I start, you mentioned like ESPN being like sort of the conglomerate for a lot of these bowls. I talked to a Sunbelt guy on Twitter, one of the guys who writes the Sunbelt pages, and he mentioned that ESPN, frankly, does not care about in-person attendance. They just care about putting out good content on for these bowl games. So I guess it makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at the matchups they have projected. I'm not sure if the guys projecting these have that in mind. But I guess starting off with the ESPN projection, you have Pittsburgh versus Memphis. For the college football news projection, you have UCF versus Boston College. For CBS Sports, which I think that's my favorite bowl projections. Very analytical in my opinion. They have playing that game. Also UCF against Pittsburgh this time. And for USA Today, which actually drops on a Tuesday, which is kind of annoying, honestly. Wish you could drop on a Sunday if it would just load. There we go. You had Boston College versus Tulsa, which I'm not sure Tulsa fans travel well. And then, of course, for Action Network, Pitt versus UCF. So out of all those matchups, which one do you think is, I guess, the most provocative matchup?
Yeah, it's tough to say this early in the season. As we were mentioning, I'd love to see BC up there in the Fenway Bowl, and I think they might end up in a bowl of that caliber. with Djokovic down, I thought with him in the lineup, they might have ended up actually winning the ACC or coming close and being in maybe a little bit of a better, more traditional bowl. So you might see BC there. That might make sense. And then it's tough to say. I mean, amongst the AAC, I guess that's the fun part about these bowl games is you're playing matchups that you don't normally see. I'd like to see maybe BC or Pitt versus say SMU. I think that would be really fun. You got Tanner Mordecai, the quarterback from SMU, is just a gunslinger. I think he's got 20 TDs and 5 interceptions at this point in the season. Against an ACC defense, I think that might be an intriguing matchup. You don't have a ton of traditional rivalries or anything like that, so you got to kind of just lean on the flash and the matchup in terms of the as much stats and as much eye popping plays as might be able to hop on the screen.
Yeah, and you bring up SMU, a team that is far, but I mean, likely will be a 10-win team, 9-win team, maybe. We'll see. But again, there's already murmurs of them being in the New Year's Six caliber team, excuse me. So I do think that's interesting. I think it's interesting as well that we'll talk about it later as well with the Military Bowl, how the American sees these games as sort of like their New Year's Six games and puts their best competition. I guess if Temple were good or if Navy were good, well, maybe not Navy because I mean they're a national draw. But if Temple were good, I doubt they'd be in the Fenway Bowl because I mean you want to put your best show on against these power conference programs, and I think that shows in these projections with especially UCF. I can't imagine Florida or people from Orlando wanting to travel to Boston in the heat of winter, even if it's Fenway, America's ballpark. But I mean, it's UCF, and it's good for the reputation of the conference because I think it's a joint decision between the conferences involved actually, and ESPN to put the teams in these bowl games. What fascinates me is how they have Tulsa in this one. Because I think it was USA Today that had Tulsa going to this game, which that one's interesting to me because I think Tulsa at best may be a 7-5, 6-6 team, and not exactly the best team for that bowl. Um, so I mean that one's interesting to me. I think something else as well to factor in is with increased bowl games, there's inevitably going to be probably a few 5-7 teams, and of course conference obligations not fulfilled. Do you see the Fenway Bowl grabbing Army as sort of like a regional team to fill that spot if the American doesn't have, I mean, if the American doesn't have any regional teams available to play in Boston?
Yeah, I would think there'd be no reason not to. I mean, Army's looking like they'll probably be a 9-3 team this year, maybe even 10, I mean, depending, a couple of bounces the ball difference, maybe from 8-4 to 10-2. So they'll definitely have a pretty strong season. I think as we're exchanging on Twitter, I think they'll probably win the CIC trophy, and they're gonna have a nice season. Gonna have a little bit of a groundswell about them. I would think that would be a really attractive draw for the Fenway Bowl if they could get Army.
And I think it's interesting too, like we bring up Army, in that the ACC, their bowl selection process, it's not into tiers anymore from what I've seen. I think it's all one pool after the New Year's Six, because in past years you'd have like the Gasparilla Bowl. I think the three bowls were the Gasparilla Bowl, the Independence Bowl, and the Military Bowl, which were actually in a pecking order, and the teams that weren't selected by the mid-tier pool. So with that, I'd be excited if they find a way to get Army in the Fenway Bowl. I'd be excited to see maybe a Notre Dame team on a down year, even though I think like a lot of projections have them going New Year's Six, but a loss to Cincinnati I think could make that less likely, along with another trip up along the way. But I guess what do you think the likelihood of Notre Dame making it into the Fenway Bowl? I mean, it seems like so great. They had the game in 2015 in Boston against Boston College, and I think that would just be a great proposition, but probably unlikely.
Yeah, if you'd asked me this question a week or two ago, I would have said, there's a chance. Who were they coming off of? It was a very lackluster win over, who was it, Tulane or Tulsa? I can't remember.
Toledo.
Toledo, yeah. So one of those T teams, yeah. So now now they're 4-0. They're undefeated. Big win over Wisconsin. I know it was close until they really pulled away there at the end of the fourth quarter. So now if they carry that momentum in that they had in that win over Wisconsin, you might be talking New Year's Six. You might be talking even playoffs with them. So it's possible that they really fall off, and the Wisconsin game's a fluke for them. But I think that they're probably going to be in a higher caliber bowl than the Fenway Bowl.
Yeah, with the ACC, I think the Cheez-It Bowl has like the first selection of non-Year Six teams, and I've seen a lot of projections with Notre Dame and Texas. Which, I mean, why wouldn't you have that brand name clash
Sure.
there? I mean, so yeah, it's a cool idea, of course, for me just being an Army fan. Hopefully, I mean, we always want a shot against Notre Dame, especially me, a history nut. I mean, probably was one of the most meaningful rivalries in college football for a long time. But I think that wraps up our discussion of the Fenway Bowl. Unless you have anything to add.
No, yeah, let's keep it rocking.
All right, so we'll move on to another ballpark, Yankee Stadium, for the Pinstripe Bowl. And these projections are more interesting because they're kind of nostalgic in a way in these matchups that they have. I'm going to start off with, I think, my favorite of them, USA Today's projection being Pittsburgh versus Rutgers in New York City. Action Network has Virginia Tech versus Rutgers. CBS Sports has Boston College versus Indiana, which I think is interesting that they'd have Indiana and not. Well, they have Rutgers not even making the bowl, but they have Maryland slated for the Gasparilla Bowl as a substitute. It just a lot of stuff to take in there for CBS Sports. ESPN has Rutgers versus Virginia Tech from Kyle Bonagura, and Mark Schlabach has Purdue versus NC State, which is interesting. I think this hinges on Rutgers finishing at 6-6. There's a lot of doubt there. And College Football News has Louisville versus Rutgers. I guess a Big East 2.0 rivalry. People, I guess there's not really a name for that era of the Big East. So I guess the big thing there is just the renewal of old rivalries. Do you think that's huge for the Pinstripe Bowl? I'm pretty sure the Pinstripe Bowl has had problems drawing because it has not looked full on TV in the past few editions of it. So do you think the conference rivalries will add something to that, or I guess does it not really make a difference?
Oh no, for sure. It'll be a huge difference. I mean, it's the old Big East was more of a basketball conference. So it's not exactly the same rivalry wise, but if they can get out of the Big Ten, Rutgers or Maryland in there, and out of the ACC, Pitt, Boston College, Louisville, Virginia Tech, maybe even Cuse. I highly doubt it, but somebody like that, I think that would be a huge draw. You got a lot of teams that are well within driving distance, especially when you're talking about Rutgers there. So I think, I mean, we talked about, hey, like the TV revenue is the biggest thing with these bowls, but I'm sure that, they would be much happier to have the extra revenue from a lot of in-person attendance, as well as, it's just a better product when you have a more of a packed stadium. You have the groundswell, you have the optimism of a team like Rutgers, who's maybe bowl eligible for the first time in a while. So I think that whole conglomerate, that whole composition of the rivalries, as well as the locality of the bowl, would be huge for the Pinstripe Bowl.
Yeah, you mentioned Syracuse, and I mean, I'm inclined to think Syracuse becomes bowl eligible. I don't know. Do you disagree with that proposition? I mean, right now the Atlantic looks like the ACC Atlantic looks like anyone's division to take. And Syracuse, they've looked impressive. They had the big win against Liberty on last Friday night. So I don't know. You seem kind of iffy in Syracuse becoming bowl eligible.
I mean, it's certainly possible. They're sitting at 3-1. That's not a terrible start. The only loss to Rutgers, who's looking really good this year. The bit of a quarterback controversy there with the incumbent Tommy DeVito being benched for Garrett Schrader. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I mean, the ACC is pretty weak this year. So can they get 4 wins or so? Yeah, probably. but could they fall flat on their face and lose out? Could also be possible. I would not be surprised at 100% complete chaos out of the ACC in its entirety this year, both the Atlantic and the Coastal divisions. So anybody's guess, but I think Cuse has a pretty solid shot.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because the matchup that I'd like to see is Rutgers Syracuse. I think that could actually sell out Yankee Stadium. I know Syracuse has tried the whole New York City marketing thing with their games at MetLife. Hasn't really gone well, but I guess you combine that with Rutgers, who I think played in the highest drawing Pinstripe Bowl against Notre Dame, which Notre Dame, of course, probably was like 60% of the reason why it was the highest drawing Pinstripe Bowl ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that can be a close second too, and just it's a great story. Resurgent programs. I always feel like Dino Babers has been on the edge of a breakthrough, especially after 2018. I want him to continue the good work there, but yeah, that should be, I guess, one of the more interesting ones, especially if we get I guess a reminiscence. Yeah, reminiscence back to the Big East in this era of conference realignment, where no rivalry is safe, frankly. So that'll be interesting to see. Do you have anything else to add about the Pinstripe Bowl before we head over to the Military Bowl?
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about Maryland. I think we talked about can Cuse or can Rutgers be bowl eligible. I think Maryland has a pretty good shot as well. Looking at the advanced metrics, in fact, like every team within the Big Ten East is within maybe the top 50 or so in the country, and Maryland is no exception there. So, they got Talua slinging the ball. Mike Loxley looks like he probably has the best team that he's had under his tenure, and they've got two stud wide receivers in Raheem Jarrett and what's the other one named Dorsey? Do I have that right?
Dante Demas.
Probably.
I'm not so sure. I don't watch too much Maryland football.
Yeah. Dante Demas. That's it. So huge game coming up for them. Iowa Hawkeyes coming to town this Friday. So we'll see if Maryland's for real or not. I don't expect them to win that game, but if they can be competitive in it, they can certainly be bowl eligible, and maybe the Pinstripe Bowl is a good draw for them.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, I've thought about that before with I guess any of the years where Maryland's been on the edge of eligibility. I guess at any year they've been eligible, there have been like more attractive teams to pick for the Pinstripe Bowl, like 2014. That was Penn State's big return to bowl eligibility. So the Pinstripe Bowl went with them. I think 2016 they went with Northwestern, and they used the old Wall Street cop out, saying Northwestern had a huge following on Wall Street, which didn't really work well. That game looked poorly attended. They said the same thing about Duke. They said the same thing about Duke in 2015, and did the same thing with the nerd school in 2016. What gets me about Maryland is I see a lot of swing games, particularly I think the games against Indiana and Rutgers, I think, will probably be like bowl eligibility elimination games, and I think those two teams, well, pretty much those three, including Maryland, are like too volatile to tell well, I guess not volatile, but we don't know enough about Maryland. Indiana, we have last year, but this year, I mean, like we have the volatility for Indiana, and again, we don't know too much about Rutgers. So three interesting scenarios there.
Yeah, the problem for Maryland and Rutgers, as we were saying, is they play in the Big Ten East, which may be the toughest division in all of football this year. If they're both in the Big Ten West, I would say bowl eligible, no doubt about it. But can they scrounge up 2 and 3 wins respectively in the Big Ten East this year? Probably, but those wins got to come from somewhere, and maybe they come against the Big Ten West in those crossover games, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Maryland has Minnesota, and of course, we all know Minnesota lost as a 30-point favorite last week. I don't know what's going on with Minnesota. It's a pretty sharp decline. I've not seen anything like it in a while from that program. So maybe Maryland steals a win there, and they have to get one win out of either Indiana or Rutgers to become eligible. It's doable. It's just, I mean, it's too soon to tell.
Yeah, and they probably can knock off a Michigan or a Michigan State in an upset or something like that as well. maybe Penn State. Who knows? All of these teams are pretty solid this year, and there's no gimmies.
Yeah, exactly. Especially Michigan State looked pretty vulnerable last week. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see for sure. It'll be interesting there. Going on to our last bowl, the Military Bowl, out in Annapolis, and that one's usually either Navy or Temple's bowl, but neither is good this year. So it's pretty interesting to see who gets slated for that one. And as I find it, forget which day. Okay, December 27th, found it. So we have SMU Pitt from College Football News. From ESPN, they have North Carolina versus Central Florida, which is pretty interesting. I'm not sure how far they expect North Carolina to slide. They have Miami versus Central Florida. I should say UCF because I've heard UCF Twitter hates being called Central Florida, so I'll call them UCF. Uh, and then for CBS Sports, they have Louisville, Memphis, old time rivalry going back to the Metro Conference in basketball in their independent days. So very interesting there. For USA Today, they have Louisville versus Memphis as well. And for Action Network with Brett McMurphy writing these, they have Louisville versus Memphis. So it looks like the growing consensus is a Louisville versus Memphis reunion. I am interested in that Miami UCF matchup. I'm not sure how far they expect Miami to slide, but I guess out of all those, would you like to see a Louisville Memphis or Conference USA reunion in Annapolis, or change things up, I guess, and get UCF traveling up to Annapolis for, I guess, either a traditional power in Miami or I guess an exciting team like North Carolina.
I think I'd be more intrigued to see the old CUSA matchup between Memphis and Louisville. I think probably if Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback for UCF, was healthy all season, I might be interested in that matchup as well. But unfortunately, I think he broke his collarbone, if I have that correctly. So he's going to be out for an extended period of time. Might even be out through the bowls. So yeah, I think I'd go Louisville, Memphis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm partly intrigued by UCF Miami because I don't think Miami has scheduled UCF more than once. I think they have that one meeting in like '05 and that's it. Or, well, not '05 actually. I think they met again in like '09, but they don't meet often. And I think more in Florida more than any other state, there's that whole big brother little brother complex between like the programs like whether it's USF and Florida, or whether it's USF and UCF, the FAUs, FIU, and of
Hmm.
course the bigger programs. I think that little brother complex exists, and it will be interesting to get that game because the schools aren't going to schedule it. You see how hard it was to get UCF to and Florida to schedule a home and or yeah, I guess a home and home and home for that one. So I'm intrigued by that. I think it's interesting they have Miami going to that one because I assume that all the other bowls would pass up on Miami because Miami doesn't travel well from what I've heard. Um, and I guess the other bowl that would be a draw that for a team like Miami would be the Sun Bowl, just because of their name brand. They haven't played in that one since 2015, but there's other options available for the Sun Bowl. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd be more intrigued by UCF Miami or I mean, it's tough because it's tough to really imagine the Military Bowl without Navy or without Temple playing in it. So
Yeah, but I don't think either of those teams are are looking like they're going to win at least 6 this year.
yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. I mean, to see what they do. I mean, I'm interested in like North Carolina, like how far they had them sliding because the interesting thing with the ACC is now we have to factor in something we haven't had to do in like 6 7 years is factoring Clemson into a non-year six bowl into these projections. And I got to think that the Dukes may actually. Yeah, I think maybe the Dukes Mail would take Clemson, even though they had them in the kickoff game. But I mean, there's North Carolina as well too. So I mean, I think that they'd get. It's hard to tell with ACC who's going to be New Year's Six and who's not at this point. But that interesting kind of curveball with Clemson not being good, it really confuses things.
Yeah, and maybe we have a Wake Forest or somebody like that actually taking Clemson's spot and going into the college football playoff or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I'm kind of rooting for North Carolina State in that case. And I guess we're getting kind of off topic talking about non Northeastern schools, but I'm rooting for North Carolina State because they have awful luck. I don't think they've even won a division title in football. It's a really underrated snake bitten program. Like people don't when they talk about snake bitten programs, they don't talk about NC State.
Hmm.
I mean, so I'm kind of rooting for them, but I mean, it's good to have someone other than Clemson for a year, even if it's just this 1 year.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I'm pulling for basically the entirety of the ACC to to make it to at least contention for the college football playoff. I think if we get an undefeated like a Wake, or I think it's probably impossible for Boston College to remain undefeated without Phil Jerkovic. But if we could get an undefeated team like Wake, that would do it. I think a one-loss team is in the ACC is probably already out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I guess that eliminates NC State then because they had their one chance against Mississippi State, I guess, for a resume building non-conference
Yeah.
win. I mean, I guess their next best non-conference win would probably be Louisiana Tech, honestly, from the looks of it, which it's not a resume building win. Um, but I mean, I'm excited as well. I'm a huge fan of parody, and I've heard comparisons to 2007, which I wouldn't say that just yet, but it's exciting to think of.
Yeah, well, we're just getting into conference play, so we got a whole lot more in store for us.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I guess as we close, what are some of your games to watch this week? In the Northeast, I know Boston College Clemson is probably the one on the top of your mind, but are there any other Northeastern games that you're looking at?
Yeah, like I said, Iowa coming into Maryland on Friday night. I think that'll be a real test to see if both these teams are for real. Iowa did not look great last week. Forgot who they played, but it was a middling win. So maybe they were looking ahead to conference play or not. And then the big game I have for myself personally, and probably a lot of Penn State fans, is the Indiana Penn State game coming up this Saturday night. Kind of hopefully a revenge game on the loss to Indiana last year for Penn State, which kind of started their whole downward spiral and a very controversial ending, if you remember, in that 2-point conversion when the quarterback Michael Penix dove for the end zone. And I've seen the camera review 1,000 times. I still think he was out, but they won the game. So I think this adds a lot to the pseudo rivalry, I'd say, and to the game this weekend for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's overlooked too, especially with Indiana's struggles this year. I know a lot of people had Indiana as like a darling of this year.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to see them do well, especially with Ohio State losing, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, that's a pretty good slate for sure. Especially, I mean, just I guess a lot of teams. I guess it's like a judgment day for a lot of, or yeah, judgment day for a lot of teams this week in the Northeast. Really facing like their first test because it feels like, I mean, like you mentioned with Maryland, feels like Maryland always starts like 2-0, 3-0, and then they get exposed, and it's always exposed badly, especially 2019.
Yeah.
That was such a sharp decline. That was bad.
September Maryland can beat anybody, but once you leave September, they, they're in for a different ball of wax.
I guess to round out the slate, we have Temple versus Memphis as well. Just other mentions: Temple versus Memphis, rematch at Lincoln Financial of that 2019 upset by Temple. Which it's interesting to think how high an undefeated Memphis would have been that year, how highly ranked. I don't think they would have been that high because their their Power Five win wasn't great. I think it was Ole Miss in a down year. Navy UCF. I'm intrigued by that one because. I love the triple option, and I just want to see if Navy works out the kinks because it's just looked ugly. But we'll see on that one. Then Army Ball State to round things out, and also UMass Toledo, a nice MAC rematch. I know UMass always brings their best out when they play Toledo, especially 2015 when they almost upset a ranked Toledo. So oh yeah, and I'm forgetting UConn, the game that every sicko is looking forward to, UConn Vandy. I guess that'll be our final point. John, who do you have winning UConn Vandy?
It's got to be Vandy. UConn has just been in such disarray. They looked actually pretty good against Wyoming last week, but I think it's Vandy.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree, but I gotta feel like they're turning a corner. I do feel like they're turning a corner a bit, enough to say that they'll beat UMass. I'm not too confident to say they'll beat Yale though. And I don't say that as a joke. I mean, Yale, they play up to anyone really. I mean, they beat Army in 2015. So, um, but I do think that 14.5 point spread's too high for UConn Vandy. I think these teams are more evenly matched than we think. But it's exciting. It's exciting to think that a
Yeah.
game, yeah, so bad is on the schedule.
Yeah. I mean, Vandy should not be favored by 14.5 against anybody. That's like if there's a team that you don't trust and they're favored by more than one score, take the points, and obviously you cannot trust Vandy. So take the points.
I mean, yeah, exactly. There you have it. For our betting friends, take UConn covering as they covered last week, and they covered against Army, a very bad backdoor cover that I fell victim to. It's pretty upset about that. but again, that's a different point. John, thanks for coming on. Looking forward to this next week. Hopefully things change so we don't have to have the exact same conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they will. We've been so early in the season that they have to, and if we have a 2007 like season, it's going to be changing a lot. There'll be plenty for us to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. Thanks, John. And we'll see you next week.
All right, man.
Peace on the soul.
Thank you. All
Yeah,
right,
of
take
course.
care.